The whispers started like wildfire through the auction crowd the moment Katherine Caldwell stepped onto the wooden platform, her full figure casting a long shadow under the harsh afternoon sun of Copper Creek, Wyoming Territory, 1875. Standing at the back of the crowd, Garrett Quinn pulled his hat lower, watching the scene unfold with a quiet intensity that belied the storm brewing within him. "Ladies and gentlemen," the auctioneer announced with exaggerated enthusiasm, "next up we have Miss Katherine Caldwell, fresh from Boston. She's answered an advertisement to serve as a schoolteacher, but as you can see, she's—" He paused dramatically, robust enough to handle any frontier challenge. Cruel laughter rippled through the crowd. Katherine's cheeks flushed crimson, but she kept her chin high, clutching her small valise with white knuckles. At 22, she'd traveled over 1,000 miles to escape the confines of her old life, only to find herself displayed like cattle at this bride auction she'd been deceived into attending. "Do I hear $50?" the auctioneer called. "Surely someone needs a hardy woman to keep their bed warm through these mountain winters." More laughter. A few crude remarks. "$40, I'll give 20 for the fat one," someone called from the back. Katherine blinked rapidly, fighting tears. "20 once, $500. The crowd fell silent, parting as Garrett Quinn strode forward. At 30, the rancher was known throughout the territory not just for the successful operation he'd built from nothing, but for his fierce sense of justice and a stubborn streak wider than the Laramie River. "Mr. Quinn," the auctioneer stammered. "Surely you jest. Do I look like I'm jesting, Wilbur?" Garrett's voice was low but carried across the suddenly silent square. He climbed the 3 steps to the platform and extended his hand to Katherine. "Miss Caldwell, I believe you came here to teach, not to be humiliated. I've been waiting for a proper schoolteacher for my district for going on 2 years now." Katherine stared at his outstretched hand, confusion and suspicion warring with desperate hope. $500, Garrett repeated, turning to the auctioneer. "And it's not for a bride, it's to fulfill the territory's teaching contract, which I suspect you've been pocketing funds from." The auctioneer's face drained of color. Garrett turned back to Katherine. "Miss Caldwell, you're my choice for the teaching position, if you'll accept, that is." Katherine placed her trembling hand in his. "I would be honored, Mr. Quinn." The crowd murmured as Garrett escorted her from the platform, his tall frame shielding her from the curious stares. As they walked away from the auction square, Katherine's legs felt wooden beneath her. "I don't understand," she whispered. "The advertisement said nothing about a bride auction. It specified a teaching position in need of immediate filling." Garrett's jaw tightened. "Wilbur Henderson's been running this scheme for nearly a year. Brings in unsuspecting women, auctions them off to the highest bidder, and pockets the territory's education funds meant for their salary." "That's despicable," Katherine said, outrage momentarily overpowering her embarrassment. "It is, and it ends today." He stopped walking when they reached a handsome bay horse tied to a hitching post. "I actually do need a teacher, Miss Caldwell, for my ranch and the surrounding homesteads. There are 17 children in need of education." Katherine studied him, her brown eyes wary. "And the $500 will be your first year's salary once the territorial administrator confirms your credentials." He gestured to her valise. "I assume you have them," she nodded, still uncertain. "Good. The schoolhouse is about 4 miles from town on the edge of my property. Mrs. Hollister runs the boarding house where the previous teachers stayed. It's modest but clean." "Previous teachers," Garrett's expression darkened. "The last 2 left, found frontier life not to their liking." Or perhaps they found the locals not to their liking, Katherine thought bitterly, remembering the cruel laughter. "I'm not easily discouraged, Mr. Quinn," she said firmly. Something like admiration flickered in his hazel eyes. "I can see that, Miss Caldwell. Please call me Katherine." "Katherine?" He tested the name, then offered a rare smile. "I'm Garrett." 3 days later, Katherine stood before her first class in the simple one-room schoolhouse. 17 children of varying ages looked back at her with expressions ranging from curiosity to outright suspicion. "Good morning," she began, her voice steady despite her nerves. "I am Miss Caldwell, and I will be your teacher." A boy of about 12 raised his hand immediately. "My pa says you're too big to sit in the teacher's chair without breaking it." Katherine felt her cheeks burn, but before she could respond, a quiet voice spoke from the doorway. "Jacob Turner, that'll be enough." Garrett Quinn stood there, hat in hand. "Miss Caldwell is educated at one of the finest institutions in Boston. You do well to listen more and speak less." "Yes, sir," the boy mumbled, eyes downcast. Garrett nodded to Katherine. "Just making sure you have everything you need, Miss Caldwell." "I do, thank you." Her voice was cooler than she intended, but his rescue, while kind, had underscored exactly what she was trying to avoid: being seen as someone who needed protection. If Garrett noticed her tone, he didn't show it. "Children, Miss Caldwell has traveled a great distance to teach you. I expect you to show her the respect she deserves." After he left, Katherine took a deep breath. "Now then, who can tell me about the history of Wyoming territory?" The weeks that followed were challenging. Katherine adjusted to her new life, grateful for the small bedroom at Mrs. Hollister's boarding house and the respite it provided from curious eyes. The widow was kind, if somewhat reserved, and the room was indeed clean and comfortable. Teaching brought both frustrations and rewards. Some parents pulled their children from school after learning of the large Eastern woman who had come to teach. Others gradually warmed to her as word spread of her skill and patience. Every Friday, Garrett Quinn would appear at the schoolhouse door just as lessons ended, ostensibly to check on school matters but inevitably finding reasons to engage Katherine in conversation. She found herself looking forward to these visits, even as she maintained a professional distance. One Friday in late October, 6 weeks after her arrival, Garrett lingered longer than usual. "The Harvest Festival is tomorrow," he said as she organized papers at her desk. "The whole county comes together, food, music, dancing." Katherine continued sorting. "It sounds lovely. Would you consider attending?" "With me?" She looked up, startled. "Mr. Quinn, Garrett," he corrected gently. "Garrett. I appreciate the invitation, but I don't think that would be wise." His brow furrowed. "Why not?" Katherine sighed, setting down her papers. "You know why. I've heard the talk in town, how you rescued the poor fat schoolteacher out of pity. I won't have people thinking I'm pursuing you, or that you feel obligated to." "Obligated," Garrett interrupted, stepping closer. "Katherine, I've spent every Friday afternoon for 6 weeks finding excuses to be in your company. Do you truly believe obligation drives me?" Her heart stuttered, but years of mockery had built walls not easily breached. "What I believe is that you are kind. Too kind, perhaps." Garrett's expression softened. "It's not kindness that brings me here, it's admiration. For your intelligence, your patience with the children, your courage in coming all this way alone." He paused. "And yes, for your beauty too, though you refuse to see it." Katherine felt heat rise to her cheeks. "Mr. Quinn, Garrett," he insisted again, a smile tugging at his lips. "Garrett," she conceded, "I'm not accustomed to compliments." "Then you've been surrounded by blind fools." He took her hand, his calloused palm warm against her skin. "Come to the festival, dance with me once. If you wish to leave after, I'll escort you home without another word on the matter." Against her better judgment, Katherine found herself nodding. One dance. The Harvest Festival transformed Copper Creek's Main Street into a whirl of color and sound. Lanterns hung from every available post, casting golden light over long tables laden with food. A makeshift dance floor had been constructed in the center of the street, where a 4-piece band played lively tunes. Katherine arrived with Mrs. Hollister, her heart pounding beneath her best dress, a deep blue affair that she'd altered to better fit her figure. She scanned the crowd nervously, half hoping Garrett would have forgotten their arrangement. "Miss Caldwell." She turned to find him standing behind her, and her breath caught. Gone was the practical rancher in work clothes. In his place stood a striking figure in a crisp white shirt, dark vest, and polished boots. His usually unruly dark hair was combed neatly, though one stubborn lock fell across his forehead. "Mr. Quinn." Her voice came out softer than intended. "You look beautiful," he said simply, his gaze unwavering. Before she could respond, a waltz began. Garrett extended his hand. "I believe I was promised one dance." Katherine placed her hand in his, allowing him to lead her to the dance floor. She was acutely aware of the stares following them, the whispered comments. "Everyone is watching," she murmured as he placed his hand respectfully at her waist. "Let them," Garrett replied, guiding her into the first steps of the waltz. "They're watching because you outshine every woman here." "You don't need to say such things." His expression grew serious. "I've never said anything to you I didn't mean, Katherine." They moved together with surprising grace, Katherine following his lead as if they had danced 100 times before. For a few precious minutes, the whispers faded away, replaced by the music and the steady rhythm of Garrett's heartbeat beneath her palm. When the music ended, Katherine stepped back, flustered by the intensity in Garrett's eyes. "Thank you for the dance," she said formally. "One wasn't enough," he replied softly, "but I'll keep my word if you wish to leave." Before she could answer, a commotion erupted near the food tables. Jacob Turner, her troublesome student, had knocked over a punch bowl that splashed across several well-dressed women. As the boy fled the scene, he crashed directly into Katherine, sending both of them tumbling to the ground. "Watch where you're going, fatty," Jacob cried, scrambling to his feet. The crowd fell silent. Katherine sat in the dirt, punch staining her best dress, humiliation burning through her like wildfire. Garrett moved with startling speed, hauling Jacob up by his collar. "Apologize," he demanded, voice deadly quiet. "I'm sorry, Miss Caldwell," Jacob stammered, wide-eyed at Garrett's anger. Katherine struggled to her feet, painfully aware of every eye upon her. "I should go," she whispered. "Katherine, wait," Garrett began, but she was already pushing through the crowd, tears threatening to spill. She made it halfway down the darkened street before Garrett caught up to her. "Katherine, please, leave me be," she said without turning. "This was a mistake. Looking at you could never be a mistake." He moved to stand before her, his expression earnest in the moonlight. "That boy will be apologizing properly on Monday with his father present. It doesn't matter." "It matters to me," Katherine shook her head, wrapping her arms around herself. "I came west to escape this very thing. The stares, the mockery. In Boston, I was the unmarriageable daughter, too plump for proper society. I thought here, where survival matters more than appearance, I might find acceptance." A bitter laugh escaped her. "How foolish!" Garrett took a step closer. "Not foolish, brave, brave." She looked up at him then, moonlight illuminating the tears she could no longer hold back. "Yes, brave. You crossed a continent alone. You face those children every day, earning their respect through sheer force of will. You've changed this community in just 6 weeks." His voice dropped lower. "You've changed me." "Don't," she whispered. "Why not?" "Because I see you clearly. Because when I look at you, I don't see the things you hate about yourself. I see strength and grace and beauty." "You can't possibly." "I can," he interrupted firmly. "And I do." He reached out slowly, giving her time to pull away, and brushed a tear from her cheek. "I've known from the moment I saw you on that auction platform. You were holding your head high despite everything. I recognized something in you, then a spirit that matches my own." Katherine stood perfectly still, afraid that any movement might break whatever spell had fallen over them. "I don't know how to believe you," she admitted finally. "Then let me prove it, day by day." He lowered his head until their foreheads nearly touched, beginning now. His kiss was gentle, questioning, giving her every opportunity to pull away. Instead, Katherine found herself leaning in, her hands coming to rest against his chest as something long dormant awakened within her. When they parted, Garrett smiled down at her. "Does that help my argument, despite everything?" Katherine laughed. "Perhaps, though I believe in thorough evidence." "Then I'll have to kiss you again." His eyes crinkled at the corners. "For the sake of proof." The second kiss lingered longer than the first, sweet and full of promise. When they finally separated, Katherine felt light-headed. "I should take you home." Garrett said reluctantly. Yes, she agreed, though part of her wanted to stay in this moment forever, suspended in the moonlight with the taste of him still on her lips. He offered his arm and she took it, allowing him to escort her back to the boarding house. At the front porch, he kissed her hand. "May I call on you tomorrow?" he asked. Katherine nodded, suddenly shy. "I would like that." Winter descended on Wyoming territory with merciless swiftness. By mid-November, snow blanketed the landscape, transforming Copper Creek into a world of pristine white. The schoolhouse stove worked overtime to keep the children warm during lessons, and Katherine found herself grateful for her size on the coldest days. The extra padding provided welcomed insulation against the biting wind. Her relationship with Garrett progressed with cautious joy. He called on her every Sunday after church, taking her for sleigh rides through snow-covered meadows or simply sitting with her in Mrs. Hollister's parlor, talking for hours. He spoke of his dreams for his ranch, of the years of back-breaking work that had transformed it from a humble homestead to one of the most prosperous properties in the county. Katherine shared stories of her childhood in Boston, of a father who loved her dearly but died too young, leaving her at the mercy of a society that valued women primarily for their marriageability. "I was nearly engaged once," she confessed one snowy afternoon as they sat before the fire. "Edward Pennington, he was my father's business partner's son." Garrett's hand tightened around hers. "What happened?" "I overheard him speaking to a friend. He said marrying me would be like bedding a cow, but my father's money would make it worth the sacrifice." Her voice was steady now, the old pain dulled by time and distance. "I broke the engagement that same day." Garrett's expression darkened. "If I ever meet this Edward Pennington, you won't," Katherine assured him, and it was a blessing, really. "It showed me exactly what I was worth in Boston society, just my father's money, nothing more." "He was wrong," Garrett said fiercely. "So wrong that I can't find words strong enough to express it." Katherine smiled, squeezing his hand. "I know that now." In December, tragedy struck the Turner family. Jacob's mother fell ill with pneumonia, leaving the boy's father struggling to care for her and their 3 younger children while maintaining their small farm. To everyone's surprise, it was Katherine who organized the community's response, arranging a rotation of women to help with meals and childcare, and personally taking over many of the duties herself. "You don't have to do this," Jacob's father told her one evening as she prepared to leave after cooking dinner for the family. "Especially after how Jacob has treated you." "Children learn what they see, Mr. Turner," Katherine replied simply, "and illness doesn't care about past grievances." Word of her kindness spread through the community. The same people who had whispered behind her back now nodded respectfully when she passed. More children began appearing in her classroom, sent by parents who had previously kept them home. On Christmas Eve, Garrett invited Katherine to his ranch for dinner. His housekeeper, Mrs. Abernathy, had prepared a feast, and the dining room was festively decorated with pine boughs and candles. "It's beautiful," Katherine breathed, taking in the elegant table setting that seemed transported from an Eastern dining room. "I wanted it to be special," Garrett said, watching her face. "A proper Christmas." After dinner, they sat before the great stone fireplace in his study, a room lined with more books than Katherine had seen outside of Boston. "You've read all of these?" she asked, amazed. Garrett nodded. "My mother valued education above all else. She taught me to read before I could properly ride a horse, which was scandalous for a rancher's son." "She sounds wonderful." She was. His expression grew distant. "She died when I was 15, influenza." Katherine placed her hand over his. "I'm sorry." "She would have liked you," he said, turning his hand to interlace their fingers. "Strong, educated women were her favorite kind of people." "I wish I could have met her." Garrett looked at her thoughtfully. "There's something I want to show you." He led her to a small room off the study. Inside was a beautiful piano, its surface gleaming in the lamplight. "It was hers," Garrett explained. "I've kept it tuned, though no one's played it in years." It's magnificent, Katherine said, running her fingers reverently over the keys. Do you play? She nodded. My father insisted. He said music fed the soul. Would you? Garrett gestured to the bench. Katherine sat down, adjusting her skirts, and began to play. The melody of Silent Night filled the room, soft and clear. When she finished, she looked up to find Garrett watching her with such tenderness that her breath caught. Katherine, he said softly, kneeling beside the piano bench, I've never met anyone like you. These past months have been the happiest of my life. He reached into his pocket and withdrew a small velvet box. Katherine's heart began to race. I know it hasn't been long, he continued, but I've never been more certain of anything. He opened the box to reveal a delicate gold ring set with a single pearl surrounded by tiny diamonds. This was my mother's. I'd be honored if you would wear it as my wife. Katherine stared at the ring, then at the man offering it. Garrett, are you certain? The talk, let them talk, he interrupted gently. I love you, Katherine Caldwell, every part of you, your mind, your heart, your body. All of it. I want to spend my life with you if you'll have me. Tears welled in her eyes. Yes, she whispered. Yes, I'll have you. The church was packed for their wedding in early May 1876. Spring had transformed the landscape, dotting the prairie with wildflowers that Katherine had insisted on using for her bouquet instead of formal blooms ordered from Denver, as she stood at the back of the church on Mrs. Hollister's arm, standing in for the father long gone. Katherine caught snatches of whispered conversations. Never thought Quinn would marry, stubborn as he is. She's certainly substantial, but they say she saved little Mary Turner's life during that fever. Finest teacher we've ever had. My Johnny's reading full books now, Katherine smiled to herself. Not adoration, perhaps, but respect. It was more than she'd ever had in Boston. The music changed, and she began her walk down the aisle. Garrett waited at the altar, his expression transforming when he saw her. The love in his eyes was so naked, so pure that Katherine felt tears threatening. Jacob Turner, now her most dedicated student, stood proudly as Garrett's ring-bearer, his once cruel face now solemn with the importance of his duty. When Katherine reached the altar, Garrett took her hands in his. You are the most beautiful bride this territory has ever seen, he whispered for her ears alone. Dearly beloved, the minister began, we are gathered here today. The ceremony passed in a blur of emotion. When they were pronounced husband and wife, Garrett pulled her into a kiss that caused several chuckles and a few cheers from the congregation. The celebration afterward was held at the Quinn Ranch, with tables set up under blooming apple trees. Everyone from miles around attended, bringing food and gifts and good wishes. Even those who had once mocked Katherine now raised glasses to toast the new Mrs. Quinn. As the sun began to set, casting golden light across the land that was now her home, Garrett pulled Katherine away from the crowds to a quiet spot beneath the largest apple tree. Happy? He asked, tucking a strand of hair behind her ear. More than I ever imagined possible, she replied honestly. Good, he kissed her softly, because I plan to spend the rest of my life making you happier still. Katherine laughed, a sound of pure joy. Is that a promise, Mr. Quinn? It is indeed, Mrs. Quinn. His arms tightened around her. One I intend to keep. As they returned to their guests hand in hand, Katherine realized that she had found far more than acceptance in this wild territory. She had found love that saw beyond surfaces, a community that valued contribution over appearance, and a strength within herself she never knew existed. 1 year later, Katherine stood on the porch of their home, watching as Garrett rode in from checking the far pastures. Her hand rested on her swollen belly, their first child due in just 2 months. How are my girls today? He called as he dismounted, striding toward her with the same eagerness he showed every evening. We are well, Katherine replied, smiling as he knelt to press a kiss to her stomach before rising to claim her lips. The doctor is certain it's a girl, Katherine laughed. The doctor has no idea. But a mother knows. Garrett placed his hand over hers. A daughter as beautiful and brilliant as her mother, I can't imagine anything better. As they stood together, watching the sunset paint the Wyoming sky in shades of gold and pink, Katherine thought of that humiliating day at the auction platform. How close she had come to turning back, to fleeing to the safety of familiar rejection rather than facing new ridicule. "What are you thinking about?" Garrett asked, noting her expression. "How sometimes the worst moments can lead to the best ones," she replied. "If I hadn't been mocked that day, you might never have spoken up." Garrett shook his head. "I would have found you somehow. Some things are meant to be." That night, as they lay together in their bed, Garrett's arm protective around her changing body, Katherine knew he was right. They had been meant to find each other, two souls who saw beyond surfaces to the truth beneath. "I love you," she whispered into the darkness. "And I love you," he replied, his hand gentle on her belly where their child grew. "All of you. Always." In the years that followed, Katherine would often think back to that frightened young woman who stepped off the train in Wyoming territory, seeking only independence and respect. She had found those things, yes, but also so much more: love that embraced rather than judged, community that valued contribution over appearance, and the profound joy of being truly seen. Their daughter Emily was born that summer, followed 2 years later by a son they named James. The Quinn Ranch prospered, as did the school where Katherine continued to teach until Emily was old enough to take her place. And if newcomers to Copper Creek ever wondered about the love between the rancher and his full-figured wife, they needed only to see them together: the tenderness in his touch, the laughter they shared, the deep understanding that passed between them without words, to know that theirs was a love story for the ages, born in a moment of courage when a cowboy took a mocked woman's hand and declared, unashamed before the world, that she was his choice.